Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and free-loving people in Montana. We have Tony Rosales here tonight. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yep.
And he's going to fill us in on what's going on over in Cascade County and all the fun and games over there. So take it away, Tony.
Thank you, Dave. So we'll just get right into it, and I really just want to focus everyone's attention right on the probably the most real or the most factual piece of evidence that we have in this case, and that's a phone recording that the detective took that's during this incident or during this shooting. We'll get into details of it, but I just really want to get everyone's raw ears familiar with this recording because it'll be pretty instrumental as we walk through this more.
How goes it, Mike? We got a search warrant for the property. My partner's got the paper copy, but
what do you need a search warrant for?
because we got a search warrant. You'll read it when you get it here.
Huh?
You'll see it when you get here.
All right.
But we got a search warrant. So
Why do you guys go chase some real criminals?
what do you mean? I do chase real criminals.
Oh, bullshit. Chasing after Pam. She hasn't done a damn thing.
What's she doing out here?
Bringing me food and water for the animals.
Okay. What's her conditions say?
Huh?
What does her bail conditions say?
I don't know.
She's not supposed to be around animals or possess anything animals.
Well, you get your fucking warrant.
I already got a warrant. Mike, come back here. You need to leave the property.
I don't have a way out of here. I don't have a
Well, you need to stay off the property, so step off. Or you can go to jail for obstruction, I'm telling you now. Step off the property. Who else is here?
nobody.
Okay, step off the property.
Fuck that. Let me see your
I'll show you the warrant, but you're going to step
Let
off
me
the
see
property.
it. No, I ain't
Yes,
stepping
you
off
are.
nothing until I get a warrant.
You're going to step off this property, I'm telling you now.
When I see a warrant.
Okay, come here. Step off the property.
I'm not stepping off the property.
Step off the property.
All right.
What do you got there? Get your head.
Fucking asshole.
744 North Sheriff, 40 shots fired. I got one subject down. I've been hitting my left shoulder. Subject down. Been hitting my left shoulder. 77 Wexford Lane.
Okay, but we'll get everybody into it.
So that's just this first part of the recording. We'll get into some more details, but I just want to really emphasize that all of that conversation took place in less than 2 minutes. So the conversation and then the resulting gunshots took less than 2 minutes in totality. And we'll get into some of those details about what actually happened and all of that. But as we do that, I really want us to first get an understanding and the context that led up to this actual phone recording, who the players are who were involved, and what brought us to February 23rd, 2024. So honestly, this goes back several decades, all the way back to 1996, where the Cascade Sheriff's Office started investigating Pamela, or Pam as we will refer to her, Polajewski, mainly for animal cruelty charges, as you'll see for some of these future time points as well. So then in 2005, the Cascade County Sheriff's Office conducted a large-scale animal cruelty investigation where they removed 150 animals from the premise. In addition to that, Pam was arrested and charged with assault on a police or a peace officer, resisting arrest, and obstructing a peace officer. One thing I really want to note is a lot of the information that's included here is obtained from Cascade County Sheriff's Office Shooting Review Board, which we'll get into what that is in a bit. But a lot of this information is based off of how the Sheriff's Office has presented it or how it was presented during the inquest as well. Later on, so another instance in 2020, another large-scale animal cruelty investigation started where they removed 172 animals from the property. Pam was released on bond in order to not possess animals of any kind. And that's going to be pretty important as we get into the recording more and what was happening on that day of February 23rd, mainly noting that she wasn't, at least based off of everything that we saw and submitted to the search warrant, she wasn't really going against her release or her bond conditions based off of how they were stated. So that happened in 2020. Fast forward a couple of years to present year 2024. While servicing a search warrant, it resulted in the death of Michael, or Mike as we will refer to him, Hansen, on Friday, February 23rd. And that's what we just listened to in the recording, was that exchange between a law enforcement officer and Mike. Later on this year, on June 4th, an inquest was held to determine that criminality of the detective responsible. So this is, I mean, again, this all comes from early three decades prior, and all of that context, especially when it comes to Cascade Sheriff's Office going after Pam and being a target of investigation, and how that influences the rest of their investigation towards the death of Mike Hansen. So let's just walk everyone through what happened on Friday, February 23rd, 2024. So on that day, Sergeant Harris, who was off duty at the time, he spotted Pam, and this is an image that was taken at Walmart, but she was spotted at Walmart buying cat food, and you could see the cat food in that picture there. So for any law enforcement officer who had any sort of history or awareness of Pam, they would have known that she has, or that there's a ongoing investigation and ongoing charges related to animal cruelty. So obviously this would trigger some concerns for them. For Sergeant Harris, after he saw Pam purchasing the cat food, he then called up an officer who was on duty, so Detective Sergeant Jacob Try, and then Detective Try eventually would confirm this purchase by going to Walmart, obtaining video footage, that's where this image is from, as well as getting a receipt from Walmart as well. So that was the Walmart spotting. So this was early on Friday, so this was shortly after noon. I think Detective Try was at lunch during that call that he got from Sergeant Harris. So after the Walmart spotting, then Detective Try ends up trying to submit an affidavit for a search warrant. And at the same time, he sends Detective Smith, another deputy with the sheriff's office, to perform surveillance. And we'll get into some of those details on surveillance. But as Detective Try is submitting that evidence that he got from Walmart, or as he's on his way to the office, he sends Detective Smith to travel to 77 Wexford Lane, which is the property that Pam owns, but Mike lives on that property. And so he's conducting surveillance. While he's there, he observed a black F-150 near the gate, and Pam was handling various things. A large bag on the property, which appeared to be heavy, and this is all based off of quotations from the affidavit. 5 plastic containers, which appeared to be empty cat litter containers, and then 2 large trash bags. Note, Detective Smith also observed a cat on the top of the shed, but if you're out in the country, especially where this is at, it's really hard to tell on whose cat is who. So that's just sort of a note. They never really said whose cat it was. They just said they observed a cat on the shed, as well as all of these other large bags or containers. Pam would eventually become aware of this surveillance, and we'll walk through how that was, and left the residence with Smith following her to Smith's Groceries. So we're going to be using Smith's a lot because that was one of the detectives, as well as a good amount happens at Smith's Groceries. So before we get to the next step, let's just walk through where this property is. So this is out in the county, so out in Cascade County. There is, let me see if I could do this correctly. So here, McIver Road. So this is a paved road. This isn't really too much of a main road, so most people who are driving on this live out in the country. It might be an emergency route, but no one really ever uses that. So this is a paved road, but then this darker, more brown line, this is Wexford Lane, and this is all a dirt road. And it comes to an end here, which is the property that is owned by Pam, but is where Mike lives. So this is the 77 Wexford Lane. It's blown up here in this image. So when thinking about this, the detective drove all the way down this road and came somewhere around here to surveillance the property. So likely whoever is out here to check out 77 Wexford Lane, and it's really not too much of a surprise for anyone. Essentially, it's very difficult to be able to conduct surveillance without being spotted in the first place. And again, the sheriff's office has had plenty of experience on this property. They know this exact property, and they know that surveillance isn't going to be something that's truly possible. They did it anyway. Pam ended up spotting them, and then she ended up leaving and then going to Smith's Groceries, where the detectives would rendezvous. So the detectives rendezvoused at Smith's Groceries after losing track of Pam. So they were following her truck, but eventually they made their way to Smith's. They found her truck, but they didn't see Pam. Detective Smith located that pickup, lost sight of Pam, and then eventually Detective Try arrived at the parking lot after submitting his affidavit. And then Corporal Lindland, another deputy with the sheriff's office, would also show up to assist. I think largely it was to be able to print off a search warrant if the search warrant was granted. But we would later find out his printer was broken. So Detective Try attempted to locate Pam and call her to inform her of impounding her vehicle. At least this is based off the testimony of Detective Try. And one thing to note is, as he's trying to call her up, and he's already called a towing company to take the vehicle, there is no signed search warrant at this point at all. So they're impounding her vehicle, or in the process of impounding her vehicle, without even having a signed search warrant in the first place. And this isn't anything out of the blue for our sheriff's office. Is actually pretty common for them to do, to try and take evidence before they actually have the search warrant in hand. So that was them at their initial aspect of the Smiths. Eventually, the judge, a district judge, Kuntzman, would call Detective Try up to swear him in, or to give him the oath and swear him in on the affidavit, and then electronically sign the search warrant. So once they got the search warrant signed, the deputies were waiting for a tow truck to impound the vehicle. One thing to note, and you can see the search warrant here, at least this is the signed search warrant, doesn't necessarily have the affidavit from Detective Try, but you'll see some of the things that are included here: a brown single wide trailer, a Jayco RV, a Prowler fifth wheel trailer, multiple sheds and barns, and 2 horse trailers. One thing that is not mentioned here is a Ford F-150 pickup truck. So despite having a signed search warrant, they impound a truck which is not included in that search warrant in the first place. So a huge error on their part in terms of not including that in the search warrant, but then even furthermore, towing the truck or impounding the truck when it's not even included in the search warrant in the first place. So after getting sworn in on the search warrant, after waiting for the tow truck, the deputies will leave to execute the rest of the search warrant. And just before they're leaving to go out there, Detective Try finally reaches Pam on the phone, informing her of the impending search. So he essentially had called Pam up to say, "We are impounding your truck, and we are now headed to your property to execute the search warrant." So giving ample leeway to communicate to Pam that they're going out and going to do the search warrant. So after they have the search warrant, they've now traveled to the property. So the 2 detectives, and in this case, we're talking about Detective Smith and Detective Try, because Deputy Lindland was eventually called elsewhere. And this is actually a pretty important consideration, because during that time, or on this day, based off of testimony from several Cascade County Sheriff's officials, there was a lot of activity going on, and there weren't extra hands to be able to assist with the different things. So Deputy Lindland had to be called off of this, and so it was just Detective Smith and Detective Try who were at this point working on it. Detective Smith was asked to go to the sheriff's office to pick up an evidence tech and print a copy of the search warrant. So they had the electronically signed search warrant, and Try says he had it on his phone, but they wanted to get a paper copy of the search warrant. So they sent Detective Smith to go get that. Later on, Detective Smith, as he's on his way, was later asked to follow the truck to get into the impound lot, and then to take photographs of it. So while Detective Try is headed to the property, he is having Detective Smith do some different things that prevent him from being backup for Detective Try and executing that search warrant. So as Detective Try proceeds to the property alone, halfway down Wexford Lane. So again, this, just to get your context, this is that main paved road up here, and going down, this is the dirt road. So somewhere halfway down this road, Detective Try stops and puts on his vest, which he didn't have his body camera on his vest. He has one assigned to him based off of sheriff's office protocol, but because he's a detective and not like a day-to-day officer, he was not required to have the body cam on him. But one of the things that we sort of caught on to, for one, note that he called Pam to let them know that they were going to come and do a search warrant. To travel from Smith's Groceries all the way to 77 Wexford Lane, it's about 30 minutes to get there. It might be a little shorter if you go this route, but still 20 to 30 minutes to get there. And they gave Pam the heads up of that 20 to 30 minutes in the first place. Either way, though, as Detective Try is headed to the property, he sent Detective Smith to the sheriff's office to pick up various things, the evidence tech and search warrant. Also at the sheriff's office was a body cam. So Detective Try really showed poor judgment by not deciding to just go to the sheriff's office with Detective Smith, get his body cam, get everything they needed, and then go together as a pair as opposed to going alone and traveling to 77 Wexford Lane. And so this really shows the prioritization that Detective Try had when in his decision making, thinking he needed to get onto that property as soon as possible. His initial intent when he got to the property, because he wanted to wait for Detective Smith, was to run surveillance until Detective Smith arrived. But again, this isn't a place that you can run surveillance very easily. You're going to get spotted, and it's not like you really can do anything about being spotted. So that brings us to the next instance, which gets us to the initial contact. So this is where, despite those initial intentions, Mike spotted the vehicle and approached it. And you can see, so this is the property. We'll get a zoom in of the gate here in a moment. But this is the gate to the property, and so everything else is where Mike is living. This is Pam's property. This is the spot where Detective Try did pull up. So I mean, he's pretty much right at the gate. If anyone is trying to conduct surveillance here and not get spotted, they're not doing a very good job. So because of where he pulled up, Mike did eventually spot the vehicle and approached it. And so before interacting with Mike, what Detective Try did is, because he didn't have his body camera, remember, he started to record audio on his cell phone. And that's the audio that we heard earlier in this presentation. And the reason why he wanted to record audio, or at least one of the reasons he provided later on as sort of a reason for not showing the search warrant, was because he based on that prior history with Mike, and a lot of it goes back to those different instances in that timeline with Pam. Detective Try did not feel comfortable losing any of the audio from the interaction. So he already had an idea about how the interaction might go, but he put himself in this situation where he didn't have backup, he didn't have his body cam, and he was trying to conduct surveillance in an area that is very difficult to be able to conduct surveillance in any meaningful way. So that was initial contact. This is just really just to help illustrate that point. This is the property, at least from the view of Detective Try as he was pulling up. So here is the gate to the property. We think that this brown trailer back here, this is likely where Mike was staying, and then this RV here was more just to block view or to obstruct anyone's view. So while Detective Try pulled up, it's unclear if Mike was already out there or if he was in the house. It doesn't really matter. He ended up spotting Detective Try because he's right at the gate, and he decided to approach him. So this is this is really based off of Detective Try's testimony, and we will see how that lines up with the recording that we listened to earlier, and we'll go into a little more analysis of that. So based off of Detective Try's testimony, he first jumped the gate, and you'll hear that again in the recording. So he is somewhere on this side of the fence. So this red line here is the fence. He eventually jumps the fence, reaching about here. He says that he saw Mike's firearm, and Try took the first shot, followed by his gun malfunctioning. So once Try jumps the fence, he believes he sees Mike holding the firearm. So then Sergeant Try shoots first, and then his gun malfunctions. And while he's clearing the malfunction, Detective Try says that Mike was shooting back, hitting Try in the arm. Try would eventually return fire, eventually dropping his magazine in the field while retreating. You can kind of see that labeled here from the shooting review board, a casing and magazine, mainly the magazine that was dropped in the field. But then at his vehicle, he would call in on the radio, which we listened to right at the end, insert a new magazine, rack his firearm, and then wait for backup. All while at that time, Mike is laying here, either already dead or dying from the gunshot that was just inflicted upon him. So with that said, we're going to listen to the audio transcript again with the context of where these guys are in relation to an aerial footage and what you saw for what that gate looks like. But we're going to also follow along with the transcript here above. It's going to be quick and sometimes you might miss things, but just try and follow along as best as you can. And then we're going to get into some more details about this transcript, especially with these gunshots. I got it with that. There we go. Oh, oops, sorry. Here, let me move this real quick so then I can play with that better. Yeah. I'm guessing my screen stopped sharing, right? There we go. Okay, let's try this again.
How goes it, Mike? We got a search warrant for the property. My partner's got the paper copy, but
What do you need a search warrant for?
because we got a search warrant. You'll read it when you get it here.
Huh?
You'll see it when you get here.
All right.
But we got a search warrant, so.
Why do you guys go chase some real criminals?
What do you mean? I do chase real criminals.
Oh, bullshit. Chasing after Pam, she hasn't done a damn thing.
What's she doing out here?
Bringing me food and water for the animals.
Okay. What's her conditions say?
Huh?
What does her bail conditions say?
I don't know.
She's not supposed to be around animals or possess anything animals.
Well, you get your fucking warrant.
I already got a warrant. Mike, come back here. You need to leave the property.
I don't have a way out of here. I don't have a
Well, you need to stay off the property, so step off. Or you can go to jail for obstructing, I'm telling you now. Step off the property. Who else is here?
Nobody.
Okay, step off the property.
Fuck that. Let me see your.
I'll show you the warrant, but you're going to step off the property.
No, I ain't
Yes,
stepping
you
off
are.
nothing until I get a warrant.
You're going to step off this property, I'm telling you now.
When I see a warrant.
Okay, come here. Step off the property.
I'm not stepping off the property.
Step off the property.
All right.
What do you got there? Get your head.
Fucking asshole.
I'll go ahead and stop that there because we obviously then get him in trying the car where then he calls in for backup. But a couple of things that I just want to point out from this that we think are pretty important, and you know, there's probably even a lot more. That's one of the things with this case is as we are digging more into it, learning more, just rereading things, we always find something new. But at least some of the things that continually pop out to us in this section here, when they're asking about the bail conditions, it's very clear that Mike has clarified the reason why she was bringing cat food in a bag. It was because she was bringing food and water for Mike Hansen's animals. He had a dog on the property at that time. Additionally, throughout all of this, you see that Mike was asking to see a warrant several times, and every time that he asked to see the warrant, Tri refused and ordered him off the property, when in reality he needed to demonstrate that there was a search warrant first in order to provide any orders. And so he didn't exhibit the search warrant, and he didn't have any probable cause to ask him off the property. And then additionally, you could kind of hear him climbing the gate to get onto the property. And then there was you know, some audio to suggest that, you know, something's going on or something caught Tri's eye, which eventually led to him shooting his firearm, malfunction, and then remaining gunshots. So one thing I want you guys to remember, Detective Try said that as he was clearing his malfunction, that's when Mike started shooting back at him. And that's when he got shot in the arm. Detective Try got shot in the arm. And once he cleared that malfunction, he was able to return fire. So to be able to test that, assessment, we're going to take a look at some audio analysis that one of our team members did for us, looking at the gunshots. And so what we have here, and I wish I kind of broke these up, but I didn't have too much time. That's okay. So this first part here, this is more the real audio file, and then we sort of break it out based off of how we characterize the shots. But when you listen, and you can easily identify these gunshots. So here's gunshot one. Throughout this section, you have the clearing of the malfunction. You also have Mike saying "fucking asshole," because likely, or based off of Try's testimony, Mike was just shot in the neck, or grazed his neck. So after clearing of the malfunction and after "fucking asshole," there's shot 2, the shot 3, shots 4 and 5, and then shots 6 through 9. As we look at these audio signatures, and I think you can really tell down here, they all have fairly distinct waveforms or wave functions. So looking at these red ones, for example, you have this first peak, but then you have another second prominent peak in all of these. And so these ones, we are pretty certain that these are Detective Try's shots, especially based off of him having his phone and recording on his phone while he is shooting. And so it is going to have a little more of that the sound waves from the gun. For these other gunshots that are here, you see that missing second peak. So it has that first peak from the gunshot, but then that second peak is fairly absent. And so based off of that, we know who shot first, and that was Detective Try. He even testified that he shot first. But based off of us matching this waveform to the other ones, we can demonstrate that not only did Try shoot first, he shot first, cleared his malfunction, shot again, at which point Mike was able to shoot back. Try fired 2 more times, and then Mike finished the rest of the bullets that were in his magazine. So ultimately, we had Detective Try shooting 4 times, Michael Hansen shooting 5 times, but Detective Try had fired twice before Michael Hansen fired his first shot. And this time frame from shot 1 to about shot 3 is just a little bit over 2 seconds. So if Mike truly had his gun out, like Try was testifying, you would expect that there would have been gunshots from Mike much earlier on. And just noting that there was no gunshots during the clearing of the malfunction, and the first shot after the malfunction was from Detective Try, this alone demonstrates that his testimony about the gunshots was not based off reality. And this is really what we need to use to judge what reality is. So this is when we saw this was one of our smoking guns, really, because this is really indicative of, first, Try not telling the truth, and 2, there's suspicion to believe that Try did not see any sort of firearm and decided to shoot because his nerves were up. He was alone. He put himself in a position that he shouldn't have, and because of that, resulted in the death of a Cascade County resident. So this was our audio analysis. This was something pretty big that once we found this out, we knew we were on the right track. So after this incident, there were several investigations that were conducted following the incidents. There's an autopsy. There's this Sheriff's Office Shooting Review Board, which we've been reviewing some of that information. And then the Division of Criminal Investigation also provided an investigation as well. The autopsy is fairly straightforward. So this was done by Dr. Aldo Fazaro, and he provided the following details. One of the gunshot wounds, which he didn't describe which one was first, but this is really based off of Try's testimony. So gunshot wound A, but really this was the first gunshot wound. This was within the side of the left neck. So somewhere about here, right below the ear, and it's about 3.5-inch long graze wound. In the autopsy report, it says the directionality is indeterminate, so we don't quite know if Mike Hansen was facing towards Detective Try or facing away, and that's not something that Detective Try would be able to testify with as well, just knowing how he missed every other aspect of these these 2 minutes or so. The second gunshot wound, or gunshot wound B, that enters the anterior left chest, and then its wound course would go left to right and front to back. So it essentially goes through his chest and hits many of those major vessels, and that is ultimately the cause of death was the gunshot wound there, and he likely bled out from that. So based off of the autopsy, the cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds and manner of death was homicide. One thing to clarify, and this was clarified in the inquest, homicide is more of a term for, at least in the medical community, about just the description of the death. It provides no necessarily culpability with regard to what that homicide was. So that was the autopsy report. The next one I want to chat through is the Sheriff's Shooting Review Board. They have a couple of different pieces of information, but I want to show what they looked into with regard to the firearms that were used. So, and these are slides taken from the Shooting Review Board. So this first one looks at Mike's firearm that he had. So he had a snub nose revolver. It's this 38 caliber Taurus revolver. In it, there were 5 spent cartridges, and there was an empty chamber. As we get into the Division of Criminal Investigation, we'll see how in depth they actually analyze Mike's firearm and the bullets there, compared to what they look at for Try. So for Try, he was using a Glock 43X, and he had a 15-round Shield Arms magazine. So this magazine is likely a aftermarket magazine, and one of the reasons that it malfunctioned, and that was demonstrated in the Division of Criminal Investigation report. But in the magazine, and it's really unclear from their investigation, but this magazine, it sounds like, especially from the inquest, this was the magazine that was in Try's firearm at the end of the whole incident. So recall, Try is out there in the field. He takes his shots. Eventually, one of his magazine falls on the ground, and that was labeled in the aerial footage. And so as he got into his vehicle, he realized he no longer had a magazine seated, so he put a new magazine in and then re-racked his gun. And so this magazine is likely the magazine that was in his firearm, with 12 live rounds and then a 13th in the chamber after racking it. So as they're looking at the malfunction, a couple of notes that the sheriff's office pointed out. First, after the malfunction was cleared, the magazine fell out of his gun. So we're not sure if this magazine is the magazine that was in the field or the magazine that was in his gun. Makes more sense that this is the magazine in his gun after the incident. He returned to his vehicle and observed his magazine was no longer seated, inserted a different magazine and racked his gun, and that live round was found on the ground. And that's what this is trying to show here, of that live round that was near the driver's side door of Sergeant Try's car, which they believe was the one that was ejected when he re-racks the gun. So as they're considering Try's firearm, they believe that they found an ejected live rounds and the 12 additional rounds for a total of 13 rounds. They're saying that this was a 15-round arms magazine. And so based off of that, the sheriff's office, and this is probably still to this day, they believe that Try only shot 3 times instead of those 4 that we demonstrated from the audio analysis. So the sheriff's office is pretty convinced that that Try was only shot, or only used his firearm 3 times, or shot it 3 times. So what does the Division of Criminal Investigation look like? So they did a little more detailed investigation into the guns and the malfunctions and all of that. So their detailed investigation of Mike's gun demonstrated 8 trigger pulls, and they got that because of the hammer being able to strike those cartridges 3 additional times, but then having that blank round in the chamber would have gave them that assessment of 8 trigger pulls. Either way, there were only 5 bullets in his gun, so only 5 bullets were actually expended, but they still went into detail of identifying 8 full trigger pulls by Mike Hansen. They also found that the gun malfunction was reproducible using the same aftermarket magazine, and then they found DCI also suggested 9 total shots, so 4 from Detective Try, largely based off that recording, while the sheriff's office still only suggests 8 shots, so 3 from Detective Try. One thing that's interesting, and we've been trying to point out here, is that there's been no in-depth analysis that was reported during the inquest regarding both magazines of Detective Try. So remember, there's 2 magazines, one in the field and now one in his car. But the sheriff's investigation only talked about 1 magazine. And right now it's unclear about what magazine they were actually talking about. So that is one of our open questions, is the total of accounting of bullets from Detective Try. And an interesting thing, and Kevin's on this chat right now, while he was out there recently, they found another spent casing from the incident. So based off of them not doing their due diligence in understanding the magazines, missing evidence out in the field, we don't believe that they did an adequate investigation from the sheriff's office. And so if they didn't even do an adequate investigation of the sheriff's office, how can we assume that the inquest itself was able to serve justice if not all the information was present? One thing that I also want to note is that the guy who did the Division of Criminal Investigation, Bruce McDermott, he had been at the Division of Criminal Investigation for about 12 years, but before that, he spent his time in the Great Falls Police Department. Now, if you do the math, this means that he overlapped with Sheriff Slaughter when Sheriff Slaughter was at the Great Falls Police Department. You also find out that he was in law enforcement throughout this whole period that Pam was being investigated for animal cruelty. So in no way is Bruce McDermott a unbiased investigator in this, because he is part of that network of folks, of law enforcement officers and public officials in Cascade County who likely have a bias to protect themselves. It might not be an intentional bias, but they still have a bias to protect themselves. So with that, all of this investigation eventually accumulated to an inquest. And an inquest is a little bit different than a formal jury or a formal court for a criminal investigation. It's actually the step before that. So this is a little excerpt from the Montana Code Annotated. An inquest is a formal inquiry into the causes of circumstances surrounding the death of a person and is conducted by the coroner before a coroner's jury. The county attorney shall order the coroner to hold an inquest if a death of a person occurs while a person is being taken into custody or is in the custody of a peace officer, or if the death is caused by a peace officer, except when criminal charges have or will be filed. If the inquest is held, the proceedings are public, and this was a public inquest. So I went to the inquest, and we have a recording of the inquest. Additionally, the coroner, who also serves as a peace officer, may not conduct an inquest into the death of a person who was killed by a police officer during the same jurisdiction. So in Cascade County, our sheriff is the coroner, but because he serves in the same jurisdiction, we had to get an outside coroner. So despite us having an outside coroner to try and eliminate bias, there was still quite a lot of bias present during the inquest itself. So then in terms of what the inquest is trying to do or trying to accomplish, that's what this part of the Montana Code Annotated gets into. Ultimately, this is what the verdict must set forth: who the deceased person was, when and where the deceased person died, if the deceased died by criminal means, and if if the deceased was killed or deceased's death was occasioned by the act of another by criminal means, who committed the act. If the jury finds that the death was not by criminal means, that fact must be stated in the verdict, and we will see what the results are here in a moment. And then if there was any sort of suicide intent by the individual. Ultimately, this was the jury's results. So the deceased person was Michael Hansen. When and where: February 23rd, around 5:05 p.m. at 77 Wexford Lane. Criminal means: no. So this is where they essentially say that Try did not conduct any criminal actions that resulted in the death of Try. One thing to note, and how this often is reported by our local media, is that it was a justified, or there was no fault on Detective Try, which I think is sort of absurd when you consider what the inquest is really looking at. It has a very limited scope on trying to examine if there is criminal means for that death. It doesn't necessarily absolve Detective Try of any wrongdoing, especially anything from a procedural point of view. Now, we think not just only that he messed up on procedural stuff, but even by our Montana law, we believe that this criminal means result is inaccurate based off of what should have been presented in the inquest. So, what are our concerns? And they're summarized across three different areas. First, the inappropriate judge approval of a warrant. Most of the affidavit included prior history of Pam, and as we showed at the first part of this presentation, there's a lot of history. It was already under investigation, so that shouldn't really count as probable cause for a search warrant for a judge to sign. Additionally, there was nothing in the warrant that would suggest she was in violation of her court agreement, because her court agreement was clearly to not be in possession of animals. Didn't say anything about delivering cat food to another individual. So nothing suggested she was violating her court agreement. And then additionally, earlier, probably a couple of weeks earlier, there was in the affidavit, there was an inclusion of a neighbor complaint over barking, but there was no search warrant that was issued or investigation that was issued from that. So despite Cascade County Sheriff's Office already looking into that incident, they had included this as evidence as part of this search warrant that eventually got signed. So we have issues with our district judge who signed off on this warrant, because it shouldn't have been signed in the first place. There are a lot of procedural and likely criminal violations of Detective Try as well. He proceeded to a location that he was already familiar with, knowing that surveillance was not possible, and without any backup or body camera. When asked to see the warrant, Detective Try refused several times, continuing to order Mike off the property. And audio analysis has shown that Detective Try's life was likely not in danger, and that his testimony is not reliable to understand the facts of this case. And then the third area is just the systemic bias that we were seeing in the inquest, resulting in inadequate inquest and no real justice for Mike's death. So these proceedings were largely conducted by the county attorney, who is also legally responsible for prosecuting Pam in her current cases. The county attorney tried to shift any blame from Detective Try and from the CCSO and place that on Mike Hansen. Again, largely probably based off of that initial bias that they have with prosecuting Pam. And there was no opposing voice. So all you heard was a narrative of a justified shooting from the county attorney, and there was no opposing voice to question that, or even to question any of the witnesses who took the stand, including Detective Try, who we have found out had lied in several instances from his testimony. So with that said, what are we trying to do here in Cascade County? Well, we're partnering with this group called the Montana Citizens Council on Judicial Accountability, and we've started this initiative called the Cascade Effect. It's sort of a all-encompassing initiative, and it has a couple of different components. But the point is to educate the community on injustices in Cascade County and ensure that judicial accountability. There's three main components. The first is we want to make sure that we're getting all this public documentation. So inquest transcripts, the search warrant that was signed, the recording that you listened to earlier. But we want all of this information, or these documents, open to the public, so then they're able to look at this information, assess this information, and decide on their own, with free from bias from either our interpretation or even from the sheriff's office interpretation. Additionally, we have a investigative podcast, which some of you might have seen our first episode, and this is hosted by Peaceful Sea Network. And this is really the main bulk of the Cascade Effect, at least when it comes to some broader public outreach. So this is going to be a series where we're looking at many different instances of Cascade County officials not respecting the rights of our citizens here, with this first season focused on Detective Try and the death of Mike Hansen. And then another component, which this is sort of our foray into this presentation to the Montana Libertarian Party, regular updates and public outreach to make sure that we have an informed community. And all of this ties together for our ultimate priority goal for this particular case, and that's to impanel a grand jury to investigate local officials and provide meaningful justice to the death of Mike Hansen. This grand jury is only possible if we have an informed community to be able to investigate this thoroughly. So just to give a little spiel on a grand jury, and I'm not going to do this any justice at all. Another guy who we have working as part of this core team, Bart Crabtree, he is the president of this Montana Citizen Council on Judicial Accountability, and he knows everything there is to know on grand juries, how they need to be improved here in Montana, etc. But these are the basics that what we're trying to seek for Mike Hansen. So grand jury, it's an 11-person jury, which will require at least 8 to indict. So it's different than a criminal jury where you need all jury folks to charge the individual. Here we just need 8 people, and it will indict, or it'll provide sufficient probable cause and order the county attorney or the state to charge someone with a crime. So the point of the grand jury is to do investigation, sort of what the investigation of the inquest should have been, but do it in the people's court as opposed to through our biased judicial system. The Montana Constitution requires a grand jury to be drawn and summoned at the discretion and order of the district judge. So this is one of our current limitations, and this is something we would like to get changed in legislation, but this is how we are proceeding now. We are trying to petition a district judge to open a grand jury with this case and investigate it. And if that fails, we can always appeal this up to the Supreme Court if the judge declines. So we have a couple of different avenues to go along here. Even if the grand jury and even if the appeals don't work, there's plenty of other opportunities for us to hold detective try and hold Cascade County Sheriff's Office accountable. And just to note, a grand jury has not been impaneled in Montana probably for the last 30 years, largely due to the judiciary controlling the process. Again, it requires a district judge to sign off on this. And one of the folks that we want to investigate is one of our district judges who signed off on this bogus warrant. So with that, that sort of leads to the end of this presentation. But if you want to stay updated and see any of these new podcast episodes that come up, visit our Cascade Effect website. It's https // thecascadeeffect.net. Make sure you do not include www. Because that will not bring you to the correct spot. But if you go to this website, you will always see the latest information. You'll always have a link to the latest podcast video to check out what's going on. We had our first one released earlier this month. The second one should be released in the next week or so. And we're excited to continue pushing this investigation and continue bringing Mike Hansen's case to light. So with that, thank you, everyone. And I'm happy to answer any questions, go back to any of these slides, because there's a lot of information here. If you'd like to, get a closer look, just let me know. But thank you, everyone.
Does anyone have any questions?
So if I was hearing that last part correctly, are we not going to be able to, if the judge doesn't sign off on the indictment, does that mean thank you?
Yeah, no worries.
Appreciate it. So it says requires grand jury be drawn and summoned only at the discretion and order of the district judge. So does that mean if he doesn't sign off on it, that we aren't going to be able to obtain that grand jury?
No, we will have some recourse. So one thing we're doing right now is what's called judge shopping. So we're trying to find some district judges. It doesn't have to be a district judge in Cascade County. It can be any district judge within Montana who has that constitutional authority. So Bart is leading up that effort, and he's identified a few judges already. One of the things we're working on is a petition now, a draft petition to send to these judges. So once we've identified a judge and send them this petition, or submit this petition, because we would actually be submitting something to either the judge's office or the court's office. And so that would be an official petition that we would file. And if the judge does, hopefully we will have identified the right judge and it won't come to that. But if the judge does ultimately decline, we can still appeal that. So that's this next thing here. If the district judge refuses, we can appeal that to our Montana Supreme Court to be able to have them essentially force the district judge to sign off on it.
Okay, and then that last part where it says a grand jury has not been impaneled in Montana, can you make that just a little bit more clear? Does that mean, I mean, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, and this is based off of a survey that this group had done. So they sent out a survey to a whole bunch of district clerks, asking them if they were aware of a grand jury that had been conducted in their district. Many of them said no. I think there was one that said yes,
Mhm.
and they referenced something like 25 years ago. I think all
Okay.
this is truly trying to demonstrate is that our judiciary is controlling the process, and that's one of our issues at this moment.
Yeah.
So this is not something that um, so for this case, we think we will be able to find a judge who will buy into it, especially a judge who is not from Cascade County. But in the future, especially with how this cascade effect, because I mean, really, this is a cascade effect. It's one case, and it's repercussions throughout our entire legal system. And I think one of those repercussions is being able to demonstrate how difficult it is for us to actually call a grand jury in the first place to get
Hmm.
justice for someone's death that was already failed from an inquest that was conducted
Yeah.
earlier. So, ultimately, if the our goal with, or at least Montana Citizen Council on Judicial Accountability, one of their goals is to see or realize grand juries being activated far more often than they are now, which is apparently 1 in 30 years.
That's pretty that looks pretty bleak, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
For yeah.
but
Can
one
I
of the things, yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
can I jump in?
Yeah.
The one thing though is that they, and I think Bart has said this to us, they've never really had a case like this that has so many smoking guns that they would even attempt to go
Yeah.
after something like this. So this would
Mhm.
be this is just kind of like setting the precedent, and having this case and looking at it, and as you know, a lot of people have to look at it. I mean, he has to go back to his board and do whatever. So, when we're looking at that uphill battle, this is actually one that's come over their desk that actually has the teeth to move forward in that manner. So, it's
Yes.
been pretty interesting to kind of find out.
Actually, let me sneak in real quick. Bucha, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but since you were kind of one of the later arrivals, and since Montana is a two-party consent state, I want to announce to you that this is being recorded.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure, since we're getting
Yes,
kind of,
sir.
we're getting kind of into legal territory here. And Montana is a two-party consent state, so we are being recorded.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Cover all bases.
Yes, sir.
I just want to jump and say one more thing too. After the episodes, we'll be having Q&As. So
Yep.
after each episode, we'll be
Yeah, those are the
jumping in live.
encores.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
watched the first episode and then I watched it with the encore as well.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that
Yeah.
would
Yep.
be.
Yeah, Mike, I knew Mike, so I'm following along.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Glad to have you.
Well, thanks everyone. And if anyone has any feedback on how we're presenting this, we would be more than happy to take any of that feedback, either here or if you just want to jot it down and share to us. Because ultimately our goal at this point, I mean, we're putting a lot on Bart for the grand jury side of things, but we have to make sure we're following up on this informed community end. And so that comes from these podcasts, that comes from these sorts of presentations, which this is really our first one, and from here it's a matter of just getting out into the Cascade County community and trying to show at least some version of this presentation to more people and get more people interested in it to follow along. So then by the time we do get a grand jury, we will have an informed citizenry to know what they need to be investigating.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you guys have been doing actually a very good, thorough job, especially in informing the public, of certain rights they probably didn't even know that they had. which is extremely important, in order for them to be able to protect themselves,
Yeah.
really, or their families or friends. So I
And that
think you guys are actually doing a wonderful job. I'm looking forward to seeing what you have next.
and that's what we say too. I mean, this is also, I mean, what we do. I mean, this is us. We're the citizens too. I mean,
Hmm.
we come in contact with these
Yes.
people, and we're all, and you have certain laws, and you go, okay, you read that, but then all of a sudden it gets twisted to you and
Yeah.
slammed at
Hmm.
you in court. So, what law am I supposed to follow? where
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
not, you can't be saying one thing and then doing another.
I think that's one of the things that we're most surprised about, especially with this case, some other cases we've heard, but it's very clear Mike knew what the law was, what the
Hmm.
requirements were for law enforcement. So
Mhm.
even
Yep.
despite us knowing what our rights are, I mean, law enforcement apparently doesn't know what our rights are, and they're willing to disregard that for code
Yes.
enforcement.
Yes. Yeah, we've seen people being basically bullied by law enforcement in Cascade County for many years. It just happens. I'd say it's very routine,
Yeah,
it seems
unfortunately.
like.
Yeah.
So,
I don't want to believe it
um,
either. You
I
you do
can't.
you walk every day, right? And you're like, nah, and then you keep getting one case and then another case and then another case and another. I'm like, oh, what the heck? And
Yeah,
then here we are. I mean, we're supposed to, I had to back the blue sign in my window. I don't know about anybody else, not anymore.
yeah,
And that's if you have two bad cops, you have 125, and this is already been circulated. All 128 of them are bad.
mm-hmm,
So
yep.
that's
Can't
awful.
live with them, can't live without them.
I can live without them.
Well,
I just wanted to take some
If I
time
lived
out,
in,
guys,
yeah,
to thank all of you guys that have been helping a lot. You guys have put a lot of time, hours, hard work, and haven't asked for a thing in return and have made it as easy on the
mhm,
family as you possibly could. Um,
yes,
we are truly grateful for you guys. You have been doing it for nothing more than just the better of the community and justice for Mike. And I just hope you understand exactly how much it means to the family.
you got me choked up.
Yeah. Thank you for that, which is very much appreciated.
So thank you.
Don't cry.
You're welcome.
And this, I mean, this we aren't asking for anything. This is really about our community and making our community a better place, because this shouldn't have happened.
Hmm.
no,
We couldn't have come across better people to help us through all of this.
no.
We are lucky to have you guys. Thank
No,
you.
you've been very good, very informative, very professional.
Oh,
You
incredible.
know,
Right.
it's really good to hear the other side of the story.
Yeah, and I think that's really what we want to be doing, is trying to present an alternative viewpoint that has not been shared. Because even any of the reporting that we see on this topic, it's just parroting what law enforcement provides out to the community, and it's not
Yes, absolutely. Media is definitely one-sided for the most part as well.
right.
It's
Mhm.
awful.
Well,
It really is.
very much so, because I tried to read up on the whole thing, preparing for tonight, and I got totally all kinds of wrong information. I was not at all ready for what you presented, and
Mhm.
I'm very, very impressed. Thank you,
You
Tony. You've done an incredible job.
appreciate it. Well,
Hmm.
and it's a team effort. So there's myself, there's Kevin. Like I said, our podcast guy Jake Green, he was sort of a godsend. We were lost in terms of our next steps. I mean, we had an idea about this grand jury, but in terms of how to get that out there, we were sort of lost. And having him come around, and then we also had Bart with the with the grand jury and all of that. So this is really a large team effort, and we couldn't do it without everyone who's been involved.
Yep. Thank you for being the voice of the citizen.
Yeah,
Yep.
indeed.
Yeah, and we forget that. I mean, it's funny because Bart had warned us too that you almost have to think we have families too. I have
Yeah.
business,
Mhm.
families, and to hear the scornship of these people, they warns me, watch out for you. It's like,
Yeah.
if we, I mean,
Hmm.
we shouldn't need the, we're going to get recourse. It's like, no, okay. I mean, to hear that, and you still pledge forwards, our families too. I have a beautiful wife who's just invested because I'm up all night with it and whatever else. So we do, and we recognize, but we wouldn't have it any other way. It's
Yeah.
the right thing to do. Too many things
Mhm.
fell into place for us as we went through this, that it's out of our hands in so many ways, and we're kind of just guiding the ship.
Mhm.
It's a good way
Yep.
to put it. The winds are taking us. We're just on there.
Yes, that's right. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I'll
No,
tell,
no. But there's a lot of us that are grateful. So,
I'll tell you, doing the research I did, or the media research, which is obviously very, very tainted, I had completely was misled, and I mean, I came tonight thinking that Mike and Pam were both, the devil and the deep blue sea,
mhm.
and that obviously, I mean, there's no justification for what happened, apparently. I mean, from what you reported here, regardless of, I'm an animal lover, and it sounded like those two people were just terrible people, and obviously, what happened was not right,
Mhm.
regardless.
No,
Yeah.
I was pretty upset when I found out that, Mike was walking away from the officer. You could tell by the conversation that was going on, and he decided to jump the fence and just push it anyway.
Yeah,
And that right there just it made me very sad,
Hmm.
honestly.
yeah,
Yeah,
Mike and I share the same grandkids.
uh,
yeah.
And, so I mean, I knew him. He was a good man. And from when I was listening to the video, he was absolutely remaining as calm as he possibly could.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think I mean, I would have. I think I know where mine would have went too. He was
Yeah,
not on the warrant, and he was legally there. That is
no,
Yeah.
his resident, and he is
yeah,
legally under obligation to do exactly what he did,
yeah,
yeah,
and he did it. And
absolutely.
I know I got flack once. We were talking on our other ones because I said he was calm, because in some ways, because he's fucking swore, and I was like, I would have fucking swore too. I would have been like,
Yeah,
go get your fuck. You can hear it in his voice. It's I would have said the same thing. I would have
Hmm.
been like,
yeah.
go get
yeah,
you. After the third time I told you, go get the fucking warrant.
right.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
always within his rights, way in his rights, right?
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
so it's
Tony, thank you very much for an in-depth,
Yes.
yes, coverage of what's going on over in Cascade County, and we appreciate it all. Thank you very much, Tony Rosales.